Let's get cranking. I will say hello and welcome to Talk About Music, where for the very first time today we have two guests for a transatlantic conversation, a tale of two tenors, because tenors love to compare notes. And so I thought we should compare notes and have Eric and Kristen tell us about what it's been like these past few months, because they are both, for all intents and purposes, freelance operatic tenors as sort of their main gig. And that main gig is either not happening at all now or is happening under different circumstances. And certainly it's been an interesting time, as the Chinese say. So most of you remember Eric, who used to sing with us at church. So Eric, why don't you just introduce yourself and just give us your elevator speech of, who you are, what you do, and what you've been doing since we last saw our conquering hero.
Sure. So hi. Hi Ray. So yeah, well, since Boston, I finished in 2016. So that's when I left all of you, and I went to Pittsburgh, where I was a resident artist for 2 years at the opera there. And then after that, I did the Young Artist Program at Lyric Opera of Chicago, the Ryan Opera Center, for 2 years, which I just finished in March. And as far as COVID, this was my first year as a freelancer, and I have to say that it was going to be a really awesome season. And all of that just disappeared. At least everyone's seasons disappeared, so I don't feel alone in the whole thing. But I was supposed to be singing Tamino at 4 companies. I had my first Met contracts this coming spring. So all of that is gone, which is pretty disappointing. But I did have a gig in France at the end of August, the beginning of October. So I was in Rouen in northern France, in Normandy, doing Tannhäuser. I was singing Walter, not Tannhäuser, because that's not my repertoire. But we had a lovely time until the last week. We'd been rehearsing for 5.5 weeks, and then 4 people got COVID the 2 days before our first performance. So the whole thing got canceled. But I had a lovely time in France, and I have a Messiah coming up at the Jacksonville Symphony here in Florida. We're doing it with 30% audience, no chorus, with masks on. But I'm grateful to be doing anything right now. I've done a couple of small gigs at St. Petersburg Opera just next door, outside. Not exactly what I imagined, but I'm happy to be doing something and be making art with friends, new friends, especially here. And then the other thing to say, I guess, is, trying to figure out what to do. Like, I'm sure Christian, I'm not sure what it is like over there as much, but, you have a lot more time, so you have to figure out what to do with it. And I started studying French really seriously, because a lot of my contracts in the future are, if they're not in America, they're all in France. There is no other country apparently that wants me, but I'm happy to be going there. And so this summer, when my contract canceled at Santa Fe, I took a 7-week immersion course through Middlebury College in Vermont, and then I'm continuing my French 3 days a week with my professor. So trying to find other ways to cultivate skills and perhaps things that I wouldn't have had time for in other circumstances that are certainly helpful when you sing abroad. Yeah, I think that's enough for now.
Very good. So, Kristen, I guess same question. Walk us through, since all these fine people have never met you before. Tell us all about yourself.
Well, I am a native of the Kingdom of Denmark. I did my training in the conservatory in Amsterdam in the Netherlands, and I did Baroque singing in France for a year before that. I came back to Denmark about 12 years ago, and since then it's shifted from early music into a little bit of everything. I've done a lot of Spieltenor, character tenor, a little bit of lyric tenor, but I have a flexible instrument, and I enjoy doing different kinds of roles. But like what Eric said, I mean, all this time that was thrown into my hands to do crazy, you know, and I think you will have a duty to yourself and also to the people around you not to go crazy. So I was in Berlin for 3 months while I was doing Zauberflöte in the Magic Flute in Copenhagen. I did Monostatos, the character crazy guy, and I learned the entire part of the Klavier by Wagner because that's the way I feel my voice is going. So I took the opportunity to try it out. I don't know if I'm ever going to do it with orchestra or whatever, but just I learned just from learning it. So that's what I choose to do with my time. I'm lucky that I can work. I mean, we got sent home in March, a week before the opening of Ariadne auf Naxos, which was pretty disappointing in the Royal Opera House here. But we were able to do Magic Flute in August and September into October. And now we're doing Masquerade. So Denmark is lucky. It's actually one of the only countries in Europe where we are still performing with restrictions, with lots of less people in the auditorium. But no, we're super grateful that we can perform at this time because all the countries around us are shutting down.
Kristen, can you say a little bit about how the restrictions work? Because I know I was just flabbergasted when I saw you were doing Magic Flute this fall, and it was kind of, it's a while ago already, so it was early fall, and I was just, well, how could that even happen? And just this morning, I saw this soprano friend of a friend who posted her whole schedule of Messiahs and Christmas oratorios, and she sounded like she was still not quite certain that they would all happen, but how are they handling seeking audiences and keeping people safe?
They're letting very much less people into the hall, like in the main auditorium of the Royal Opera in Copenhagen. You can seat, I think, 1,300 people. And the restrictions are 500 people in the room, but that counts orchestra and performers and technical crew and whatever. So all the Magic Flutes that we did had 350 people in the hall, which was an audience, but a much smaller audience than what we're used to. But again, everybody was just so excited and so grateful that we could perform. And this particular staging is the Barry Kosky version from the Komische Oper in Berlin. So it's very static. It's a worldwide hit. It's been played everywhere. So that was easy to adapt. What we're doing now is quite different. So all the love duets in Masquerade are at a 2-meter distance. So if you sing, you need to keep a 2-meter distance. If you're not singing, you can keep 1-meter distance. The choir is partially singing backstage. Everybody gets tested once a week. There's hand sanitizer everywhere. We make it work. You know, that's how it's done.
So for Masquerade, essentially, it's a previously used staging, right? So they're just rethinking everything to incorporate the distance?
Yeah.
Wow. It's quite an undertaking. Yeah, I think, you know, it's just such an amazing thing. And as you say, I'm very happy they're doing it. And have ticket prices remained the same?
I lost you there for a second, sorry.
Have ticket prices remained the same at the opera, or have they adjusted the prices since they can only sell 25%?
I think it's about the same, to be honest, because I mean, the state opera is partially financed by the state, so they're not as vulnerable. I mean, I had cancellations for other things as well, organized by smaller companies or private concert organizers, and all those things are gone. But I'm lucky enough that the next 2 years for me is the Royal Opera House in Copenhagen, the National Opera in the other end of the country. And those are like the big boys in Denmark. So they're not as vulnerable, which is extremely lucky for me.
Yeah, and as you say, because you've been doing this for a while and your career has been quite changeable, as you said, going from Baroque to many other kinds of music and moving into Wagnerian repertoire. And so I would imagine for you, that means that you also have the perspective that this, you know, this career is something that changes a lot, and that you're used to rolling with that and not necessarily knowing what your season is going to be like. Whereas for you, Eric, my perception of you is you're such a hard worker, and I always sort of cite you as the example of the kind of the one person that just fast tracked everything. Like, you know, a lot of singers kind of enter the voice degree program, thinking they will do essentially what you have done, that you just, you do your undergrad, you go right onto your master's, then you find your first yap, maybe a second yap, and then you're just in that pipeline. And it happens, for fewer and fewer people. Certainly in the US, there are lots of studies out now about how that system sort of has collapsed. And so I can certainly imagine your personal frustration that you actually had made all those steps and put everything in place, and here we are. And of course, you're also still a young man, so you don't have as much of that longer view, whereas I'm sitting where I'm sitting. I'm convinced that you will still have a fabulous career. It'll just take a little longer because of this nonsense. But kudos to you for filling the time. So what are you hearing from the opera companies, Eric, that have they postponed their seasons? Are they thinking that all of this stuff will happen kind of like the Olympics a year or two down the pike? Or what are they telling you?
I mean, the tune has definitely changed the longer that this has gone on. I mean, in the beginning, I think that like in March, we thought that Santa Fe would do the end of the summer. That's where we were. So it's just kind of interesting to see how far we've come, or not, I guess. It depends on the company. Some of them have just straight up canceled. Some of them have postponed to next season. Some are not moving the production, but they're promising roles within 3 years at the company in comparable roles. The union here, AGMA, has been kind of negotiating all of that from contract to contract. So I was working at 3 or 4 AGMA companies and have gotten anything from 0 with no promises to reschedules to payouts. It's just, it's been kind of the highest, from the Met paying 0 to Santa Fe paying 25% and promising a reschedule. So it kind of spans the gamut of, and of course that's really scary and frustrating and hard to deal with as a singer, because you just don't know what to plan for. We're all trying to just kind of stay above water right now until we get back, and it's kind of hard because companies can wait till the last moment to cancel because they have no incentive to not do that. And of course, we have every incentive to also wait and see. But if we have no promise of any income, they could wait till the last moment, and then we have nowhere to go. That's the kind of difficult part of it all. I will say, for me, in terms of the future, I'll be at the Met all of 21-22. So assuming, knock on wood, that we're back in the fall, I'll survive. But the things that make me sad is seeing how many friends have switched careers already. Frankly, singer friends who are much more talented than I, that have voices that really need to be heard, switching to being a real estate agent or just any number of things outside of music and inside of music. That's the part that really saddens me, because I see it more and more every day. And of course, we don't know what, I'm not trying to be a downer, but it's like, we don't know what companies are going to survive. And that's hard, but I worry about the artists that aren't going to survive, and what the art form will look like without those voices. That's kind of what I think about on the daily when I'm looking through my Facebook and stuff. I hope that we all can kind of figure it out. There has been a decent amount of support for artists. There have been some grants. There's been some stuff through the union. The Berkeleys were making a grant with the help of a lot of other people that was like $5,000 each. So I think people have been trying to do their best for artists. It's difficult for everyone right now. So, but yeah, I know I'm just rambling now. So.
And of course, one of the enormous differences between the US and Europe, as Kristen was saying, he can be reasonably confident that, no matter what happens, the organizations that have government support ongoing will stay in business. They will weather the storm. Whereas, you sort of get the impression, I'm not worried about the Met, But, as you were saying about their behavior and about, laying people off and canceling a lot of stuff, it sort of seems like the Met is not entirely confident, what their future is going to look like, because they're so dependent on, on donors and funding kind of from year to year. They can't be certain of ongoing income the way government supported national opera companies can.
Well, and the smaller companies have more flexibility, it seems, and without being rude, perhaps a little bit more creativity about how to create a season in the time of COVID. You can look at like Palm Beach Opera. You can look at Atlanta. Atlanta created basically a fest company. They just hired like 10 singers to do an entire season of repertoire. They all did it in a tent. They all lived together. So there are companies in America who are trying, who are being creative about how to do it and where and how. And then there are some companies who just would rather throw in the towel and say, see you when we see you.
You on the other side, right? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So it's actually really interesting to see something like Atlanta kind of take a European model of the system about hiring a group of really talented singers to fill out a season instead of being fully freelance. I don't know if that will take hold, but it would certainly be a way to mitigate risk between singers. If all the singers were the same, if the singers were staying in the same apartment complex, I mean, there are ways to mitigate risk. I mean, nothing's going to be safe. No. It's just about being safer and balancing the risk and the need to do art,
Well, that's basically a repertory company, isn't it? Isn't that, wouldn't the structure similar to a repertory company, only with the added health restrictions?
Yeah, I mean, well, I would say that the probably the benefit of these smaller companies is that they're like stagione companies. They're one opera at a time, whereas the rep companies like Lyric, like the Met, they just have so many moving parts. They have so many people in and out that there's just no way that they can control the spread. There's no way. Once it's in, it's going to be everywhere. So I think that, like, for me, I always wondered, the Met's doing 20 productions or whatever they do a year. Why can't they just become a stagione company? Why can't they just do one opera at a time this season? Isn't it better to do one than to do zero, or to do one at a time, one a month? I mean, I don't know. I don't know what the numbers look like, and I know that the unions probably aren't helping. They're trying to protect everyone's wages, and I love that because I'm a union guy, but I think that there's probably a lot of unions stopping that kind of switch because they'd be worried about what it would do for the future of the company. I don't know. It's complicated.
Speaking of unions, I noticed you've been doing some work within AGMA to try to make the world a better place. Which do you want to say a little bit about what you're trying to accomplish with that work?
How long does this go on for? Yeah, so I'm on the board of governors of the American Guild of Musical Artists, which is the union that represents dancers, soloists, stage managers, stage directors, choreographers, actors, and choristers in opera and concert dance and ballets. It's a vast array of people, so we have a vast array of problems, and for a long time, soloists have not really participated. The short story is the union creates a floor for wages, but basically everyone works at the floor except for soloists because we have managers who negotiate fees that are above the minimum. And so because of that, we kind of disengage with the union because we don't feel their protections like everyone else. And now that all the soloists are out of work too, a lot of them are very passionate about the union all of a sudden. And I have been in the governance of the union for a couple of years, so now I'm trying to basically take all of that soloist angst and move it towards a positive direction for the union, with some success and some not success. But yeah, I mean, it's hard to be a soloist and be in a union. I mean, it's kind of antithetical, right? You stand alone on stage. You take all of the risk. I mean, you stand alone as in you sing on your own. That's what I meant. And like at the negotiating table, it's hard to be a soloist because the backlash could be very direct in a way that when you're a chorus sitting at the table, it's much less likely for them to pick out choristers, for example. So just balancing the I'm talking way too long about this already. The difference between full-time, I'll just say this: the issue with our union is that there are full-time members like choristers, dancers, people that work full-time at companies that have healthcare, for example. And then there are freelancers like stage directors, soloists, choreographers, and actors. And we don't qualify for healthcare because the union doesn't provide it. And we obviously don't have a way to get it unless we buy it through the exchange. So there's like a big issue between those two groups in our union. And so trying to find a way forward with such a disparate sort of group is a difficulty. One that has taken up, other than my French classes, the union has been the sucker up of all of my time.
Any kind of volunteer work you do will just automatically, volunteer for a church and they'll take all your time. That's how we run.
Yeah.
Kristen, can you comment a little bit about what has that whole sort of aspect of the business, what has that looked like for you, both in general and in this period, in terms of what support is available and how those dynamics work out for you guys in Europe?
Yeah, well, there was still from most music, but it's tricky because I freelance, as most singers here do, fall in between boxes or in between categories. So a lot of my colleagues don't qualify for any help. When I was sent home with the opening of Ariadne, the theater offered me a compensation, which was nice, but that compensation was about a third of the fee that I would have gotten in total, which was better than nothing. But then I was able to go on this sort of unemployment insurance that I pay into myself, which is also partially funded by the government. So I didn't take quite as big a hit as I thought I would financially. But a lot of areas, because my friends who have international careers, like two were supposed to debut in Bayreuth this summer, they got canceled. And if you have jobs like that, you don't work, you do a number of productions a year. And if one of them falls out, it's a lot of money that you lose. We have this, the Scandinavian welfare model, whatever, in Denmark, and that works really well. So I was happy that I could get a compensation and the unemployment money from my unemployment insurance. So that's the way that I kept myself going until the opera started again end of July. We're a little bit ahead of you guys in the States, COVID wise.
Yeah, in a funny way, you could almost say that the opera scene is a little bit reflective of the personal situation, right? Because again, if you have government healthcare and you sort of have a feeling that there's a support structure that is, or the famous safety net that's so often spoken about, that you don't have to worry quite as much, and you may not have to go be a real estate agent or switch.
No, all I had to worry about was like earning some money, getting some sort of funding, like public here and it's for free for everybody. So that's never a worry of mine, for which I am very grateful, because that, if that's tied down to you working or not, then then it can become really tricky. So I just had to worry about earning some money, and that was it.
Easy.
And that's why that is why the union stuff has become so kind of important for me, for soloists, because we can't earn. There's no system to earn healthcare through our union. When we go so for example, let's say Santa Fe cancels, we go into bargaining, the union goes into bargaining with the company. Actually, Santa Fe is a bad example. Let's say Lyric Opera Chicago, and the choristers have healthcare, and they want to continue to have their healthcare. So they're negotiating priorities to keep healthcare through the pandemic. Problem is the soloists never had healthcare, so they can't bargain for that anyway. And so like the healthcare thing is a huge struggle that has only kind of intensified all of these negotiations, because some groups qualify for it and some don't. So that's also kind of part of trying to figure out a way forward for all of these groups, and to make sure everyone's safe and has what they need to survive the pandemic. So.
Well, that kind of puts you at odds, doesn't it? The soloists and the core and the, because you're lobbying for different things, so you push differently. I know that every year the Boston Ballet traditionally would lay off their core, and they would get X amount of unemployment. It was just sort of a standard thing, but that doesn't apply for any soloists, obviously.
Well, and that's the other thing. So healthcare is the first one. The second one is unemployment. So in a normal situation that isn't COVID, where the government has created unemployment for 1099 freelancers, in a normal world, all 1099 freelancers can't qualify for unemployment because they don't pay into it. So the other issue is artists are employees. They should be paid on W-2s. They should be paying into unemployment so that when they're off, they're covered, that they can apply for unemployment. But for decades, we have been considered 1099 workers in America, when we are working for companies for different periods, albeit, but we are working for them. We aren't working for ourselves. We don't decide our schedule. We aren't freelancers in the way that maybe a custom woodworker at home creates their own schedule. That's a freelancer. We're not really freelancers. So yeah, the unemployment thing, exactly what you said, Ray, is a lot of those kind of ballet companies kind of that have full cores, often in the off season would lay them off so that they could collect unemployment until the new season. That was kind of a consistent thing that a number of companies did, and something certainly that soloists could never take advantage of. So all of these conversations we're having is to try and find a solution to healthcare, to unemployment for our more freelance artists.
You sort of fall through the cracks. You're neither freelance nor that. They should declare a category, say adjunct or something like that, that would cover you. But yeah, somebody set that up very cleverly to avoid.
Well, and it's partly our own fault, because for so long we haven't been engaged to help find. We didn't know the problem was there until this happened, or we just didn't care. But now we do, and so now it's this. I think COVID has shown a lot of weaknesses in a lot of different areas of our world, and our governance. And now that we see the problems clearly, hopefully we'll find solutions.
Well, there we go. We've already talked for just about half an hour, but before we go, let's see if we have any questions for the floor for either of these gentlemen, or if you have questions for each other.
Question for Kristen. Do you have union set up very similar to the United States, or do you have a different system for that, for union representation?
I don't know, because I don't know the American system, so I can't compare. I mean, I am in a union, but my union was not able to do anything for me in this year. They actually suggested that I don't accept the compensation from the theater because they thought it wasn't enough, but I couldn't say no to it, because at that point I had zero,
Yeah.
Most places, Ray, in Europe don't have unions though. France is unionless in terms of singers. Italy's the same. I think mostly Germany is the same as well. So most of Europe, I would say, is actually unionless for singers. A lot of them have tried to group together. There's a group called Unisson in France that has tried to come together to affect change, but not in a sort of traditional union way. So they really are on their own, generally speaking.
Most of them also have some kind of government support.
Well, yeah, of course. So they're yeah.
Healthcare.
So Eric, what is your healthcare coverage now? I mean, how are you covered?
Well, I'm blessed to be married to a doctor, but for the for the rest of, so I'm really fighting for my friends, not so much for myself. But frankly, the majority of my friends are either not covered, they're actually just taking the risk to not do it because they can't afford $500, $700, $900, $1,100 a month that it costs on the exchange. I mean, it's just it doesn't work for people who aren't working, and unemployment isn't going to cover it. And or they did buy it on the exchange and are just trying to figure it out. People who were on the exchange pulled off and they're like, I'm just going to go uninsured. If I get COVID, I'll just stay at home and try and figure it out with some chicken noodle soup. So I mean, it's awful. It's not functioning right now. Yeah, I have to say I'm definitely in like the privileged position of where I am, but yeah, my friends certainly aren't.
I just like to make the point, I have a son who's a physician on the front lines, and his partner is as well. And they've taken as much as a third trim in their income. And there they are, inches away from somebody who's breathing COVID every single hour that they're on the job. So it's not good anywhere.
Yeah, my husband is a pediatrician, and they thought that they would be out of it. But as this has continued, and I'm in Florida, so we're not doing anything correctly. He has seen more and more COVID cases in children. He's been exposed a number of times, which has caused a lot of anxiety for us, especially before I was going to France. And I mean, he's in the PICU right now, and they're filled with children with COVID. I mean, and the real problem about that is that the children don't really know that they have it, so they're doing things thinking they just have a cold or whatever, and they're not kind of crazy about it like a lot of us probably are. Like if I have a cold, I might think COVID first now and get tested. They might have spread it to who knows how many people.
They're huge vectors, aren't they? Yeah.
It's the real danger, I think, that maybe we hadn't thought about. So yeah, he's been working more hours than ever, and not making any more compensation
Exactly. Exactly. It's a huge stressor in the medical community. Yeah. Well, I hope not too many of your colleagues are leaving and selling real estate, okay? Because that's not going to work in the long term either. It's just it's hard to see all this upset in the near term, and you all have beautiful instruments that require care. It's as simple as that.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Well,
what I find interesting is, of course, government's priority with the arts. And of course, with, Republican Congresses and Republican governors and Republican governance, the arts the priority goes down and down and down. And as does healthcare in this country. So, Christian, it's so interesting, going to Denmark every summer and seeing the Danish system, and what a tremendous contrast, to the American system, that we debate, should we have private insurance or government insurance? It's a dumb question. All over the world, they figured it out. And, oh, gee, I don't know if we, arts organizations, places where I worked have gotten 1% of their budget from arts fund from the government. And, it just shows America's priorities, which is not the health of its people, which is not the arts. I don't mean to be, a Debbie Downer, but it is, it's striking, what this pandemic has revealed in our country's systems and what it shows in yours. I mean, just, sorry to be a downer.
No, you're being a realist. I mean, I don't know enough about the American system health-wise or whatever to compare, but
there isn't one.
No, I mean, there are weak points in the way we do things in Denmark as well, and some of the weak points are highlighted during this pandemic. And one can only cross one's finger that this is going to, as Eric was saying, that change will arise from the consequences, the way like that. So, I think that's also part of our duty to use this terrible situation to make things better, if we can.
Here we are. Well, on that cheery note, make the world a better place. It's always aspirational. So
Yeah.
thank you for that. Thank you, Kristen. Thank you, Eric, for joining us today for Talk About Music. I hope we will hear you sing again very soon. Thank you,
you.
everyone. Have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.
Thanks so much.
You're welcome.